It was an ordinary morning on Earth when everything changed. The sky above the world lit up with strange lights. Massive ships, unlike anything humans had ever seen, appeared in the atmosphere. People stared at the sky in awe, unsure if this was a dream or a nightmare. Governments scrambled, military forces went on high alert, and the United Nations quickly called an emergency meeting. On Earth's largest news channels, the world watched as a message was transmitted from the unknown fleet. A voice, cold and commanding, echoed through the airwaves. "I am Zelfara, Princess of the Trillion Empire," the voice said, sending shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. "I have come with a demand. You will provide me with human males of strong genetic stock to serve my daughters. Failure to comply will lead to the destruction of your planet." The world went silent. The implications were too much for people to process. What did this alien princess mean? Who were her daughters? Why did she want human males? World leaders were in shock. No one had expected a peaceful contact with aliens, but no one had imagined something like this. The Trillion Empire was known throughout the galaxy as an ancient race with advanced technology and unmatched power. They could easily destroy Earth, but they were offering something else, something much worse. Zelfara's message made it clear that her species had reached a point of genetic decline. For centuries, they had lived in isolation, their population stagnant and unable to evolve. But humans, with their rich and diverse genetic makeup, held the key to their survival. Her daughters, the next generation of the Trillion royal line, were in need of human genes to become the strong leaders their people desperately required. The princess made it clear that only Earth's strongest and most capable males could provide what she needed. "Send your best," Zelfara said with an icy tone. "And in return, your world will prosper. Ignore my demands, and your world will be wiped out, your species erased from existence." Humanity was left in disbelief. How could this be happening? Many tried to argue that the princess was bluffing, that no one, no matter how advanced, would risk destroying an entire planet just for the sake of reproduction. But then came the proof. The massive alien ships, floating above the Earth, showed no signs of leaving. They were waiting, watching. The message was not a threat. It was a declaration of intent. The United Nations quickly debated what to do. Should they resist? Should they fight back? Or should they comply and hope that the aliens kept their word? In the midst of this chaos, General Marla Hayes, a military leader known for her strategic brilliance, made her stance clear. She was one of the first to speak out against the alien demand. "We cannot give in to these creatures. If we allow them to take our people, they will have a foothold in our world forever. We must fight." But not everyone agreed. Some leaders, especially those from nations struggling with economic crisis and environmental disasters, saw the alien offer as a lifeline. The princess had promised prosperity if they complied. New technologies, new resources, and perhaps even a chance to reverse the damage done to the planet. The possibility of a new alliance with the Trillion Empire was tempting. Among the population, fear and confusion spread. People gathered in cities, talking about the alien presence, some even speculating that the Trillions might be peaceful after all. But others feared the worst, that humanity was about to be enslaved, or worse, wiped out entirely. The news was flooded with opinions. Scientists debated whether the Trillion genetic demands were real or just an excuse to take over the planet. But one thing was certain: the world was about to change forever. No one knew what the future held, but humanity's ability to stand together or fall apart was about to be tested in ways no one could have imagined. In the heart of the United States, Dr. Eli Stone, a geneticist and expert in human evolution, sat in his lab, trying to make sense of the situation. He was one of the few who believed there might be more to the alien demand than just reproduction. Could it be that the Trillion Princess had another reason for choosing Earth's genes? And why now? Eli was determined to find out. As the world rushed to make its decision, he began researching the alien race, hoping to uncover something that might give humanity an edge. Meanwhile, governments around the world began preparing for what seemed like an inevitable confrontation. Some prepared for war, others for submission. The world had split into two camps, those who believed in cooperation and those who thought only resistance would save them. But the Trillion fleet wasn't going anywhere. They were patient, and they were waiting for Earth's response. The world was on the brink. Earth's leaders were at odds, the public was divided, and every day brought new questions. As the Trillion Empire's ships loomed overhead, humanity scrambled to understand what was truly happening. While governments debated, Dr. Eli Stone continued his research, determined to uncover the hidden truths about the alien race and their demands. His studies revealed something shocking, something no one had anticipated. The Trillion Empire, once a mighty force, had been in genetic decline for centuries. Their population had stagnated, and their once powerful royal bloodline was failing to produce strong offspring. Zelfera, the alien princess, wasn't just looking for human males to breed with. She was trying to save her entire species. Human genetics, with their diverse and adaptable DNA, held the key to restoring the Trillion race. Eli was stunned. The princess's demand wasn't just for reproduction, it was for survival. The Trillions had reached a point where they could no longer evolve on their own. They needed the strength of humanity's genetic diversity to survive, to rebuild, and to push beyond the limitations of their own biology. The stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. But that wasn't all. Eli dug deeper into the Trillion archives and uncovered a troubling truth. Zelfera had been using human-alien hybridization experiments for years. She wasn't just seeking human genes for her daughters. She planned to create a new hybrid species, one that would combine the best qualities of both humanity and the Trillions. This new race, she believed, would not only save her people but would dominate the galaxy. Zelfera's true plan was now clear. She was not merely trying to preserve her people. She intended to use humanity's genetic potential to build a new empire, one that would surpass anything the galaxy had ever seen. Eli was horrified. The hybrids would be powerful, yes, but they would also be born out of manipulation. The princess had been using the genetic material of Earth's finest to create beings who could one day overthrow entire species. Humans would no longer be just a resource. They would be the foundation for a new era of conquest. Determined to stop the princess's twisted vision, Eli began contacting key allies, including General Marla Hayes. The resistance was growing stronger, and they needed this information. If they were going to stand a chance against the Trillion Empire, they had to understand what Zelfera was truly planning. Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Walker, who had volunteered to be taken by the Trillions, was beginning to understand the full scale of the alien empire's intentions. He had been placed in one of the breeding camps, a place where human males were treated like prized livestock. At first, Ryan had been optimistic. The princess had promised them safety and luxury in exchange for their cooperation. But as the days passed, he saw the truth. The breeding camp was nothing like what they had been told. The women, Trillion and human hybrids, were treated as royal hares, bred for their strength and intelligence. The human men, though they had been promised respect, were used as little more than tools to ensure the survival of the Trillion bloodline. Ryan knew he had to get out. This wasn't what he had signed up for. But escape wasn't going to be easy. The camp was heavily guarded, and the aliens weren't just interested in breeding. They were conducting painful genetic experiments to enhance the hybrid's abilities. Back on Earth, as the resistance continued to grow, General Hayes knew time was running out. The Trillion fleet remained in orbit, and they were not waiting for humanity to make up its mind. Zelfera's patience was wearing thin. If humanity refused to cooperate, Earth would be destroyed. The princess had made that clear in her first broadcast, and she wasn't the type to back down. The world was on the edge of war. Protests erupted in every major city, with people demanding that their governments reject the alien demands. President Peter Andrews was under intense pressure to choose a side. Some of his advisors urged cooperation, claiming it was the only way to ensure humanity's survival. But he was also hearing from those like General Hayes, who warned that the aliens had no intention of leaving Earth in peace. The situation was becoming more desperate by the day. Earth's leaders, now fully aware of Zelfara's plans, were struggling to come to an agreement. Should they resist and risk the destruction of their world? Or should they try to negotiate with the princess, hoping that her promises of prosperity were genuine? In the midst of this confusion, Eli Stone's discovery changed everything. He had found the truth. The Trillion Empire was not just interested in human genetics. They were planning something far more dangerous. And unless humanity could unite against this alien threat, Earth would soon become the birthplace of a new hybrid species, one that could dominate the galaxy. With this knowledge in hand, Eli knew the next step was crucial. He had to share this information with the world, especially with those like General Hayes, who were already planning resistance. If they were going to stop the Trillions, they needed to act fast. And they needed to act together. The battle for humanity's future had begun, and it would take every ounce of courage, intelligence, and unity to defeat the alien empire's plans before it was too late. Earth's leaders were in a frenzy. News of Dr. Eli Stone's findings had spread across the globe like wildfire. The truth was out. Zelfara's plan was more sinister than anyone had imagined. The Trillion Princess was not just interested in human genetics for survival. She wanted to build an empire of hybrids, a new race that would dominate the galaxy, and Earth was the foundation for this plan. The world was now divided more than ever. Some nations, desperate for survival, still considered the possibility of negotiating with the Trillions, hoping the aliens would share their advanced technology in exchange for Earth's compliance. But there was no longer any doubt in the minds of many. The Trillions had no intention of being peaceful allies. They were conquerors in disguise. In a secure bunker beneath the United Nations building in New York, the world's leaders gathered for an emergency summit. The tension in the air was thick. President Peter Andrews stood at the center, staring at the holographic display of the Trillion fleet above Earth. The alien ships hovered ominously, waiting. The Trillion Princess's demand was clear: human males for her daughters, or the destruction of Earth. But now, with the knowledge of Zelfara's true plans, President Andrews knew there was no turning back. "We cannot let this happen," General Marla Hayes said, her voice cold but determined. She stood at the head of the resistance faction, and her eyes burned with resolve. "We have to fight. We can't just give up our planet and our freedom. We can't let them breed us into slaves for their empire." Many nations agreed with Hayes. Russia had already declared their defiance, and now China and several European countries joined the resistance. But the dilemma was whether humanity could stand against the Trillion Empire. Their technology was far beyond anything Earth had, and their weapons were unlike anything Earth's military had ever seen. While world leaders debated, Captain Ryan Walker was still trapped inside the alien breeding camp. His days had blurred together since his arrival. The Trillion Princess's promises of luxury had turned out to be nothing more than lies. The camp was a sterile place, where the men were treated like livestock. They were bred, tested, and experimented on in the name of creating stronger, more powerful hybrids. Ryan had tried to escape multiple times, but the Trillion guards were too advanced, and the alien technology was everywhere. His every move was monitored. But one day, as he was being taken to the genetic enhancement chamber, he overheard something that made his heart race with hope. "Phase 2 begins soon," one of the Trillion scientists said to another. "The hybrids are almost ready for deployment. Once we have enough, we will turn Earth into a breeding ground for the new empire." Ryan's blood ran cold. Deploy the hybrids, he thought. It was the final step in their plan. Once the hybrids were fully developed, they would be unleashed on Earth, and humanity would be overwhelmed by the power of these new beings. The Trillions would control Earth without firing a single shot. Ryan knew he had to warn Earth. He had to escape and deliver this information to General Hayes and the others in the resistance. The fate of humanity was now tied to his escape. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Resistance was preparing for war. General Hayes knew that the time for diplomacy had passed. The Trillions had shown their true colors, and humanity had to unite or face total destruction. The Resistance had begun assembling weapons, setting up underground bunkers, and training soldiers who were willing to fight against the alien invaders. "We might not win this war," General Hayes said in a broadcast to the world, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "But we can make them pay for every inch they try to take from us. We will fight for our future. We will fight for Earth." Around the globe, humanity's resolve grew stronger. People who had once thought of the aliens as invincible now began to believe that resistance was possible. It wouldn't be easy. The Trillions had an army, and their weapons were advanced. But Earth had something they didn't: determination, the will to survive, and the unity of a species fighting for its freedom. The first strike came quickly. In the dead of night, Resistance forces launched coordinated attacks on the alien ships hovering above major cities. While the alien fleet was formidable, it wasn't invulnerable. Earth's military, with the help of the Resistance, used unconventional tactics, hacking into Trillion technology, using EMP bombs, and setting up ambushes. It was a desperate, risky move, but it caught the Trillions off guard. In the heart of the battle, General Hayes's forces took down several key Trillion ships, sending a shockwave through the alien fleet. The Resistance had landed its first blow. Earth was fighting back. But the Trillions were far from defeated. Zelfera, watching from her command ship, narrowed her eyes as she received reports of the attack. "They think they can stop us," she muttered. "Prepare the counteroffensive. Show them the full power of the Trillion Empire." The war had truly begun. The Resistance knew this was only the first battle, and the Trillion Empire would retaliate with all its might. But they had given Earth a glimmer of hope. If humans could fight back, if they could stand together, then perhaps they could still win. As Ryan Walker fought to escape the Trillion breeding camp and deliver the crucial information to Earth, the Resistance rallied behind General Hayes. The battle for humanity's survival was far from over, but the first steps had been taken. The battle for Earth was no longer a question of if humanity could survive. It was now about how much humanity was willing to sacrifice to win. The first strike had been successful, but it was only the beginning. The Trillion Empire was furious, and the retaliatory force they unleashed was beyond anything Earth had prepared for. Zelfera, the Trillion Princess, was not just a ruler. She was a strategist, and her forces were overwhelming. Back on Earth, the Resistance continued to grow. The victory against the Trillion ships in the first wave had given people hope. The world had united in ways never seen before. General Marla Hayes became the symbol of Earth's defiance, her image projected on every screen as the leader of the human resistance. But the Trillion retaliation came fast and hard. Zelfera had made her first move, her counteroffensive, a coordinated strike on Earth's military bases and key infrastructure, crippled much of the world's defense system. The alien ships, equipped with advanced cloaking devices and devastating weaponry, rained fire on cities across the globe. The death toll was rising, and the Trillions showed no signs of mercy. It became clear that Earth would need to fight harder than ever before. Among the chaos, Captain Ryan Walker was struggling to escape the Trillion breeding camp. He had learned the terrifying truth: the hybrid soldiers the Trillions were creating would soon be ready to deploy. These new beings, born of human and Trillion genes, were not just powerful. They were ruthless, built for war, and loyal only to Zelfera. If the Trillions succeeded in their breeding program, they would unleash an unstoppable force on Earth, one that could crush any resistance with ease. Ryan knew that he had to get out. He had to warn Earth. The problem was, the camp's security had become tighter since the attacks on the Trillion fleet. The Trillions weren't going to let anyone go, especially not someone like him, who had valuable information about their plans. In the breeding camp, Ryan overheard more disturbing news. The first generation of hybrids, grown from the DNA of both humans and Trillians, was ready to be unleashed. The Trillian leaders believed these soldiers would be the perfect warriors, stronger, faster, and smarter than any human. They would be their trump card in the coming war. Ryan's escape was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only chance to get the truth out. He managed to steal a key from one of the guards and sneaked out of the holding area. Moving through dark corridors and avoiding Trillian patrols, he reached the edge of the compound. But just as he was about to escape, he was caught. The Trillian guards grabbed him, dragging him back to the central chamber where Zelfara waited. The princess looked at him coldly, her silver eyes gleaming with a mixture of amusement and anger. "You think you can stop us, human?" she said, her voice smooth and dangerous. "You think your resistance will change anything?" Ryan, battered but determined, didn't answer. Instead, he took a deep breath and managed a defiant smile. "You're not invincible. Your hybrids will never be what you think they are. We will fight you." Zelfara's expression remained impassive, but a flicker of something dark crossed her face. "We'll see how long your resistance lasts. You'll learn what true power is soon enough." Ryan was thrown into a holding cell, but his mind was racing. He couldn't let the princess's words get to him. He had to survive. The resistance needed the information he carried, and he couldn't afford to fail. Back on Earth, the situation grew worse. The Trillian counteroffensive had torn through human defenses, and the resistance was struggling to keep up. General Hayes knew that if Earth didn't act quickly, the Trillian forces would wipe out everything they had built. But she also knew that their chances were slim. The Trillians had technology Earth could only dream of. As Zelfara's forces continued to advance, General Hayes and the Resistance launched a desperate assault on one of the key Trillian strongholds. The plan was simple: sabotage their technology and buy time for the remaining human forces to regroup. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Trillians were everywhere, and the hybrid soldiers, who were already beginning to show signs of their enhanced abilities, stood ready to defend the Empire. The battle raged across the streets of cities once bustling with life. Now, they were war zones. The hybrids, tall and imposing, with eyes glowing faintly in the dark, moved like shadows. They were faster, stronger, and more coordinated than anything Earth's forces had encountered. For every human soldier who fell, another hybrid seemed to rise in their place. The hybrids were like machines, relentless and unstoppable. But Earth wasn't giving up. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Resistance fought with everything they had. General Hayes's forces, though outnumbered, used guerrilla tactics to disrupt the Trillian advance. They sabotaged supply lines, hacked alien communication systems, and used EMP bombs to disable some of the Trillian ships in low orbit. The Resistance had proven that Earth was not going to fall easily. Meanwhile, in the depths of the breeding camp, Ryan had not given up hope. He knew he had to escape again. This time, it would be different. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for the future of Earth. The hybrids were a force to be reckoned with, but Ryan had seen the cracks in their creation. They weren't perfect, and they had weaknesses. Ryan had to warn General Hayes. There was still a chance to defeat the Trillians if they could exploit those weaknesses. The war between Earth and the Trillian Empire had entered a new phase. The Resistance, though battered and bruised, continued to push back. Earth's cities were in ruins, and the global economy was collapsing under the weight of the invasion. But amidst the chaos, there was a flicker of hope. The Resistance had learned how to exploit some weaknesses in the Trillian hybrid soldiers. It was a long shot, but it was enough to keep the fight alive. General Marla Hayes stood in the command center, eyes focused on the screens. The battle raged outside, but she was determined. The Trillian counteroffensive had been fierce, but the Resistance was still standing. They were gaining ground, even if it was inch by inch. Every small victory mattered. "We can't afford to lose," General Hayes said, her voice unwavering. "Every day we fight, we delay their plans. That's one more day Earth can survive." Her strategy was simple: hold the line, and survive long enough to learn more about the trillion hybrids. The hybrids were stronger, faster, and seemingly unstoppable, but the Resistance had discovered something crucial. They were not as perfect as the trillions had hoped. There was a flaw in their genetic engineering. The hybrids were incredibly strong, but they had been bred for obedience, not independent thinking. Their minds could be influenced. If humanity could figure out how to exploit this, they might have a chance to take them down. Back in the Trillion breeding camp, Captain Ryan Walker had been tortured and held captive. The guards in the camp were ruthless. They had begun using the hybrids as guards, and Ryan could see the difference. These new soldiers were different from the first generation, more advanced, more powerful, and much harder to escape from. But Ryan had also learned something about them. The hybrids were not just physical beings. Their genetic programming had left gaps in their understanding of loyalty and autonomy. They were controlled by the Trillion Queen's orders, but they weren't infallible. One evening, when the camp was in chaos after another attack by Earth's forces, Ryan saw his opportunity. He used the confusion to his advantage. He had learned how to bypass the security systems, and now was the time to put that knowledge to use. He made his way through the shadows, avoiding patrols and slipping past guards. His heart raced, but he kept his focus. The hybrid soldiers were everywhere, but Ryan had discovered a critical weakness in their programming. If he could trigger a malfunction in the system that controlled their obedience, he could cause a distraction that might allow him to escape. It was a risk, but it was his only chance. Ryan reached the central control room, where the hybrid soldiers were being monitored. He used the access codes he had stolen to hack into the system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a loud alarm blared through the camp. The hybrids froze for a second, their programmed obedience disrupted by the sudden error in their control system. It was enough. Ryan ran. He didn't stop until he reached the outer fence of the camp. He was nearly caught multiple times, but his desperation drove him forward. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he broke through the camp's defenses and found himself in the open. But his escape wasn't the end. Ryan had to get back to Earth, to the Resistance. He had to deliver the information about the hybrids' weaknesses. He knew the Resistance needed this knowledge to stand a chance against the Trillions. He couldn't fail now. Back on Earth, General Hayes was preparing for a final push. The Resistance forces had made some progress in understanding the weaknesses of the Trillion hybrids, but they were still far from winning. The Trillions were relentless, and their technology was a constant threat. But the Resistance had made a breakthrough. They had developed a weapon capable of targeting the hybrid soldiers' obedience programming. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "We have one chance," General Hayes said, rallying her troops. "We have to strike now, before the Trillions can react. We hit them hard, and we hit them fast. This is our moment." The Resistance mobilized, ready to strike at the heart of the Trillion forces. Their target was a critical facility where the hybrids were being mass-produced. If they could destroy it, they would severely weaken the Trillion war machine. As Earth's forces gathered for the assault, Ryan made contact with the Resistance. He had escaped the breeding camp and was en route to deliver the critical information he had gathered. General Hayes knew this could be the turning point in the war. With Ryan's intel and the weapon they had developed, they might finally have a chance to defeat the Trillion Empire. The countdown to the final battle had begun. It was humanity's last chance to reclaim their world and prevent the Trillion Empire from enslaving them all. There would be no turning back. The final battle had come. Earth's last hope rested on the Resistance, and the time to strike was now. General Marla Hayes stood before her troops, her eyes hard with determination. The Trillion Empire had pushed humanity to the edge, but they had underestimated one thing: the will to fight. The war had dragged on for months, and cities across the globe were nothing but ruins. The Trillion hybrids had become a terrifying force, their superior strength and abilities devastating Earth's defenses. But the Resistance had found a weakness, something the Trillions hadn't accounted for. the obedience programming that controlled the hybrids. If they could disable that system, the hybrids could turn against their creators. Ryan Walker had delivered the information the Resistance needed. The data from the Trillion breeding camp was their key to victory. Ryan's escape had cost him dearly, but he had made it back to Earth, bringing hope to humanity's darkest hour. "We have one shot," General Hayes said to her team, as they prepared for the final assault. "We hit them hard and fast. Our target is the hybrid production facility deep in the heart of the Trillion command base. If we destroy that, we cripple their entire army." The plan was dangerous, but it was the only one they had. The Resistance had managed to create a weapon that could disrupt the hybrid control system. If they could use it inside the Trillion facility, it would create chaos among the hybrids, turning them against their masters. The assault team was ready. Soldiers, engineers, and tech specialists had all gathered, their faces set with grim resolve. They were Earth's last line of defense. The stakes couldn't be higher. If they failed, humanity would be enslaved by the Trillion Empire. Meanwhile, inside the Trillion Command Center, Zelfara watched the preparations from her command ship. The princess had seen the human resistance grow stronger, but she was confident it would be crushed soon. Her hybrid army was invincible, and with her advanced technology, the Trillions would have no problem wiping out the last pockets of resistance. But even Zelfara couldn't ignore the whispers of trouble. There had been reports of hybrid malfunctions, strange disruptions in their programming. She had ignored them at first, thinking them to be minor glitches. Now, however, it seemed like something more serious was happening. But it was too late. The human forces had already begun their assault. General Hayes and her team infiltrated the Trillion facility under the cover of darkness. The operation was risky. Getting past the guards and the advanced security systems was no easy task. But with the help of Ryan's information, they had a clear path to the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The weapon they carried could disable the hybrid control systems, but they had to get close enough to deploy it. The Trillion defenses were fierce, but humanity had learned from their mistakes. The Resistance moved with precision, disabling alarms and taking out key guards silently. They couldn't afford to make a sound. Every step brought them closer to their target. As they neared the hybrid production chamber, General Hayes knew this was the moment. They had one chance to change the tide of the war. The facility was heavily guarded, and if they were spotted, they would be overrun in seconds. "Ready," General Hayes whispered to her team. Everyone nodded. The weapon was primed and ready. The Resistance burst into the chamber, weapons raised. The Trillion soldiers guarding the room tried to fight back, but the humans were faster, more desperate. The battle was intense, but the Resistance had the advantage. They knew the Trillion tactics and weaknesses. They moved quickly, disabling security systems and planting explosives while the weapon was activated. Ryan Walker, who had joined the team after his return, was at the front. His experience in the Trillion breeding camp had given him invaluable knowledge of the hybrid systems. As he approached the main control panel, he pressed the button to deploy the weapon. The room filled with a sudden hum, and then a loud crack echoed throughout the facility. The control system had been disrupted. The hybrids, who had been bred for obedience, suddenly stopped. Their eyes flickered, and they hesitated. For a moment, they were frozen, their programming no longer able to control them. It was chaos. The Trillion hybrids turned on their creators. The soldiers who had once been loyal to Zelfara now rebelled, their instincts overriding their genetic programming. It was a full-scale mutiny. The hybrid army that had been the backbone of the Trillion Empire now turned against their masters. In the midst of the chaos, General Hayes and her team made their escape. They had planted the explosives that would destroy the facility, and now it was only a matter of time before the Trillion Command Center crumbled. As they fled, the sound of explosions echoed behind them. The hybrid production facility was no more. The Trillion Empire had lost its most powerful weapon. Zelfara watched in horror as her empire began to unravel. Her hybrids, once so loyal and powerful, were now a threat to her. The princess had underestimated the humans, and now the resistance had dealt the Trillian Empire a fatal blow. The war was far from over, but Earth had won a decisive victory. The Trillians would never be the same again. The resistance had proven that humanity would not be crushed, that Earth would not fall. General Hayes and her team returned to Earth, greeted as heroes. They had saved humanity, but they knew the battle was not over. The Trillians would regroup, and there would be more fighting to come. But the final stand had been won, and humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. The Trillian Empire might have been strong, but Earth was stronger. The resistance had proven that even against the most powerful force in the universe, humanity would always rise. The world was in chaos. The demand from the alien princess had shattered the calm of Earth's everyday life. People didn't know who to trust anymore. Governments scrambled to form responses, while the public debated what to do. Some believed that complying with the Trillian Empire was their only hope for survival. Others saw it as a cowardly surrender to alien control. As the days passed, world leaders gathered in emergency meetings, trying to find a solution. On one side stood those who wanted to negotiate. They argued that the promise of prosperity from the Trillians was worth considering. The aliens had technology far beyond anything Earth had ever known. If they agreed to share their knowledge, humanity could potentially reverse the damage done to the environment, solve the energy crisis, and cure diseases that had plagued the planet for centuries. On the other side was a growing resistance led by General Marla Hayes, a fierce military leader with a reputation for never backing down. She believed that giving in to the alien demand would lead to humanity's downfall. "We can't just hand over our people to these aliens," she said in a public address. "They may promise us prosperity now, but what's to stop them from taking more? Our dignity, our freedom. They'll take everything from us." General Hayes's words resonated with many. They remembered the horrors of past invasions and oppressive empires. They remembered the history of Earth, where the strong often trampled the weak. The idea of becoming servants to an alien race, no matter how powerful, was something that most could not stomach. But despite her warnings, some governments, especially those struggling economically, began to consider the aliens' offer more seriously. President Peter Andrews of the United States, known for his pragmatism, called for a special meeting with the Trillian ambassadors. "We need to understand exactly what the aliens want from us," he said. "If we refuse, we risk annihilation. If we agree, we could unlock a new era for humanity." On the other side of the world, the Russian government issued a bold statement. They would not comply with the aliens' demands. "We will resist until the end," their leader declared. "We will not be slaves to any species, no matter how advanced." This sparked outrage among those who were in favor of negotiations, and soon the world split into two opposing camps. Meanwhile, Dr. Eli Stone, the geneticist who had been investigating the true nature of the Trillian demand, was digging deeper into the mystery. He discovered that the Trillian race had not just reached a genetic plateau. They had been on the brink of extinction for centuries. Their empire, once vast and powerful, was now struggling to survive, with their royal bloodline at risk. Zelfera, the princess, was desperate for human genes, not only for breeding, but to help her people evolve. Eli's research uncovered something even more troubling. Zelfera's true plan was not just to use human genetics to revive her race, but to create a new hybrid species, one that would combine the strengths of both humanity and the Trillian people. The result would be a new, powerful race that could dominate the galaxy. Eli shared his findings with a few trusted allies, but the knowledge spread quickly, causing more fear and distrust among the world's leaders. If the Trillians succeeded in their breeding program, they could reshape the galaxy with a human-Trillian hybrid force. As more men were taken by the Trillians, some volunteered willingly, believing they would be treated well and might even gain status in the alien empire. Others, however, were taken against their will, dragged away to unknown worlds. their fate uncertain. Among those who volunteered was Captain Ryan Walker, a decorated officer who had spent years serving his country. He believed that if humanity was to survive, they needed to understand the aliens firsthand. Maybe this is the only way to learn their true intentions, he told his family before boarding the trillion ships. His words echoed in the minds of many who followed the news. Some saw him as a hero, others as a fool.